Good evening, everyone. It is a privilege for us at CSF to be hosting such an esteemed panel that comprises of the most forward-thinking experts who are working tirelessly to unlock the potential of technology in education for our children in Bharat. Welcoming Professor Sahana Murthy, who is one of the most pragmatic academics I have personally met. Sahana is a professor in the interdisciplinary program on EdTech at IIT-Bombay and has been the principal investigator for Tulna, the first set of standards for EdTech in India. My privilege to welcome Shashank, who is a social entrepreneur, co-founder of ConveGenius, and has been zealous in his mission of driving EdTech for Naya Bharat. And last, but definitely not the least, welcome Rahul. Rahul is an optimistic visionary who was Google's first product manager in India, and since then has not only built the capacity of many tech-driven startups to do new and impactful things, but also leads some cutting-edge work as chief technologist with Samagra. Welcome, all of you. The first round of questions, frankly, is rapid fire for my panelists. And I'll start with Shashank. So Shashank, can you give us one word or a short phrase to describe what EdTech means to school education today?
Okay, that's an interesting one. Defining EdTech in one word is difficult, but I think the COVID has opened a lot of world of innovation for a lot of EdTech players. Right? It helped us imagine schools without walls. A lot of unlearning, relearning happened during this period, and what is happening now is EdTech is enabling innovation through, first of all, accessibility, which is then leading to engagement, which is then leading to measurement, which is then leading to personalization, and then ultimately collaboration. But when we see this happening in Bharat for India 2, India 3, and rural areas, I would just like to put it in one word, which is inclusion. So that the best of the content, the best of the resources are reaching the underserved students of the country in the remotest pin codes of the country. So inclusion is one word I would say.
Fantastic. Rahul?
For Bharat, I'd say it's a window to the outside world. The phone has been representative of EdTech, and that's really the jhanki, the khidki to the external world for poor students who don't have access to the television, the programs, or the travel that many of us have.
Sahana?
I'd say it's a tool that has great potential to support learning if used well. So I'll put the caveat.
Wonderful. Inclusion, classrooms without walls, jhaki to the outside world, tool with potential if used well. That is what our esteemed panelists are calling, are describing how EdTech is being used in education today. Now, moving to the main body of the discussion, my first question will be to Rahul. Rahul, you have been at the center of tech for development for a while now. What are some of the ways in which different stakeholders, governments, private ecosystems, academics, EdTech users, civil society, how can they all come together to ensure that EdTech is used meaningfully to improve learning outcomes? And can you explain with the best example that you've seen so far?
Sure. So I'd classify these stakeholders into three categories: Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar. So Sarkar is the government, Samaj is the community, and Bazaar is the marketplace. I'll give you examples from each of these. So Sarkar, today what the government is doing is setting up the infrastructure for the future of technology in a variety of domains. So 50 years ago, when internet was built, you had TCP/IP, you had HTML. If these things didn't exist, today internet wouldn't have existed. Today we have UPI as a standard. And then that is called digital public good. There is an open standard for social good. Then in addition, you need someone to host it. So you have NPCI hosting UPI. That's digital public infrastructure. So similarly, in the education space, the government is making leaps and bounds to take NEP to the masses using technology. And that's called NDR. So the National Digital Education Architecture is that standard, and constructs like NETF and others are ways in which these would get implemented. So that's a lot of work happening on the government side to make interoperability possible amongst all these players. Then anchoring a little bit around Samaj. Giving you an example of Samaj, for example, in Haryana, one of the projects that we were part of, board papers, state board papers, they're created in a fairly ad hoc way earlier. And so how do you get them in an unbiased way, objective way, randomized way, that no one person has access to the paper. They're getting generated dynamically. To do that, we leaned upon an open source solution, Diksha, which is hosted by the Ministry of Education. Who built this? This is built, what the software is called Sunbird, and that is built by the community. Lots of organizations, individuals contribute to build Sunbird. Now, not just this being built, but also the questions that are put into Diksha there are coming from teachers. So within a couple of weeks, you have thousands of questions contributed by the teachers. So it's not only open source contributors as in programmers who are contributing to this part of the community, but also teachers and students contributing to it. And then lastly, the bazaar. Bazaar includes startups. Bazaar includes the overall ecosystem. So for example, in Uttar Pradesh, when we wanted to do numeracy, foundational learning and numeracy benchmarking, baselining, we partnered with, we created an open standard wherein you could use any oral reading fluency application. And we used Bolo there, Google Bolo, Google Read Along was a good partner there. And so in Uttar Pradesh, we were able to immediately, this was about a couple of years ago, we were able to launch this survey using that. Now you see Bhashini. Bhashini is created by AI for Bharat, housed in IIT Madras. There are numerous people contributing to Bhashini translations, data for it, but also models are being created, and now voice translation can happen by different startups. We just launched that for farmers in Odisha. And so you see, another example is DoubtNut, a very popular platform for answering doubts of students. That's integrated with what is called the Diksha Tara bot by just making a few API calls. And now suddenly 200 million children who have access to that bot and Diksha suddenly have access to DoubtNut, which is a startup. So the boundaries between these different players, between Sarkar, Samaj, Bazaar, are really breaking down, and that's a magical moment for education in India.
No, that's fantastic. Samaj, Sarkar, Bazaar, I've heard that, and I mean, I think you've said it beautifully. Moving on, Sahana, my next question is to you. We saw in the survey that kids were saying that, the most common EdTech tools that they're using are probably Google, WhatsApp, YouTube, right? And it's no surprise. But my question to you is that awareness about how EdTech can be used has always been limited, right? Both in institutional as well as in retail settings. Through your extensive experience of working in EdTech, what have you seen as some of the most dominant use cases where technology can really help education? And how do you propose institutions can start thinking about quality of products when they're procuring EdTech?
I think it's fine. Okay. So you're right, Gouri, that the understanding of EdTech and what technology can do, how we can leverage technology for effective learning, it is rather limited. So one of the first things that institutions, schools, governments, parents, that we all need to do is get some clarity on what we are using the technology for. And there's a variety, they're related but not the same. For example, are we using it for access and inclusion? Shashank referred to it earlier. Or are we using it for plain efficiency? Or if we go up to a classroom setting, are we looking at better engagement, maybe more time spent on productive activities? And the holy grail for all of us is learning. But even there, things are a lot more nuanced. So are we talking about learning how to read, phonics, phonemics? Or are we talking about, say, problem solving in mathematics, experimentation in science, understanding of facts? So the reason I'm showing this whole diversity is While all these goals are related, could be related, they're not the same. And the way the technology is designed, the way it is used, is different for each of these things. So as people who are in a position to select and use, this clarity is something we have to have, and then go and procure the appropriate EdTech. That's one point. The second point is we have to have a set of quality standards to procure the EdTech for our intended purpose. And like you mentioned earlier, EdTech Tulna is one such initiative which provides standards, and here I mean something slightly different than the kind of standards you mentioned. It's not exactly the technology-based standards, but we can think of it as criteria for design of a good EdTech product. What's the pedagogy like? Is it age appropriate? Is it subject appropriate? Are the assessments meaningful? Is there constructive feedback given to learners? Is the UI and UX well designed? So anybody who's in the position of selecting should be aware of, at least should have some standards in mind while making their selection. Again, these standards which Tulna has defined are fairly nuanced, taking the first point in mind. The third and final point to your question is that one has to pay a lot of attention to the implementation and the way the EdTech is used, right? Because I had taken some notes in the first panel. So here the use case could be a teacher-led digital classroom, or it could be more personalized learning, or it could be, a classroom solution for better peer learning and collaboration, for which actually EdTech is very suitable. Now, often this part of EdTech gets missed or forgotten. And in the first panel, we heard so many great efforts that the states are putting into supporting teachers, into the implementation. All of those also have to translate in the use of the EdTech in the classroom. So this support and training should go beyond the procedural use of technology. It can be for the teacher, it can be for the parent, or the adult who's facilitating the use of EdTech. So I think without these three, the potential of EdTech is lost.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and thank you, Sahana, for describing the multiple facets of the use of technology in education, whether it is, the nuance of the subject or the domain, whether it is the nuance of the reason why you're using EdTech, doubt solving, practice, remediation, self-learning, right? There are multiple uses, and I think it is important for stakeholders to identify what is the use to which, and what is the reason that they want to use EdTech. Shashank, my next question is to you. Frankly, from building a personalized adaptive learning solution for usage in class, to introducing a WhatsApp-based solution, and now a conversational AI platform for usage at home, ConveGenius has been very agile in responding to the needs of governments as well as the users in Bharat. I have two questions for you. One, what are some of the emerging use cases you have seen on the supply side, right, that are relevant today? And on the demand side, what are the users of EdTech, teachers, parents, administrators, in Bharat asking from EdTech solutions?
This will need a long answer. I can write a book on this. So I think I think on the agility part, yes, CG has been very agile. And people who know CG, who have worked with CG, know that we don't run it as a company, it's an andolan. It's a movement that we call it. And har movement ki ek zid hoti hai. And our zid is, we want to take the benefits of EdTech to the bottom 20 crore children in the country. So I think our agility basically stems from that fact, that no matter what, no friction. I mean, when COVID struck, we made our app online, for example, and we saw that even on the login page, there was a 40% drop. Even in a well-literate state like Andhra Pradesh, 40% users were not able to cross the OTP page itself, which was a big learning and surprise to me, right? Then I thought that fancy EdTech does not work. Even simple apps sometimes struggle to scale, right? There are very few examples. If you take example of Diksha, it's such a simple integration, right? Everybody knows how to scan a QR code these days because of payment apps. You scan a QR code, you are on an app. So any digital experience if it has to be scalable, it has to be super, super simple and familiar. You can't, imagine users to really do, and especially EdTech awareness is very little when it comes to parents. So it always has to be a +1 to what they already know. And for us, we realize that WhatsApp is the only app probably which is almost installed in all smartphones in the country. So how do we do a +1 over WhatsApp? If parents already know WhatsApp, even if they don't know what to type, if they can even touch and through buttons they can respond, their feedback, etc., we can create a learning journey and experience over it. So that's how we started creating WhatsApp bots, all our content assessment that we had curated over the years, which could not reach even 1 million students pre-COVID, almost reached 7 crore students during COVID. Simple, plain integration of all our content with WhatsApp APIs. Right? So that was like an eye-opener to me, but I think we also did a lot of data analysis to understand why this is happening. So the completion rates on apps were very, very small. I mean, in the first 7-8 years of PAL, when we were doing EdTech in schools through adaptive learning, I mean, on an average, our completion rates were 30-40% on each module. So basically, 100 students start a course, 40 complete it. On WhatsApp and now on SwiftChat, our conversational platform, it's almost 98%, which means anybody who is starting a journey is able to complete a journey because they're getting assistance of a bot in a vernacular language, which is helping them complete their user journeys, which is a big, big insight, right? And this agility is important also because, I mean, not just completion rates and all this, right? We feel that chatbots, we are very bullish on chatbots. Everything we imagine as a solution in EdTech, whether it's for children, teachers, admins, we now think it like a chatbot. Because we feel that chatbot, because it's vernacular, because it's human-like, it's a good bridge between technology and people. Because people won't come to technology in Bharat. Technology has to be superiorly simple, sophisticatedly simple. Sophistication should be hidden. Only the simple stuff should be out. Has to be extremely simple to be scaled in Bharat. So I think that's where the agility comes from. And now I think to answer your other questions, on the supply side, there's a lot that, I mean, the world is seeing. There are 9,000 EdTech startups in the country. So thanks to platforms like Tulna that now people are able to differentiate between good and bad, but there are 9,000 for the record. So, and either from coding to life skills, from STEM to adaptive learning, from home learning to online tutoring, everything exists. And we can see the success of them by seeing the ability of they able to raise funds or getting shut down. A lot of EdTech startups have also shut down in the last couple of years because the funding has dried up. But on the supply side, there's so much available. There is very little available on the Bharat side. And that makes me sad because India is a country of great developers, right, who are going to Facebook, Google, all over the world to work. But very few engineers are building technology for Bharat. That makes me sad, but there are still good solutions trying to contextualize it for Bharat, making it work for the vernacular audience, making it work for the first generation learners. And on the demand side, I think, again, India 1 and the rest of India is very different when we look at demand for EdTech. I'll talk about India 3 and below, which is Bharat, which is of interest to most of us in this room. The demand is driven by multiple factors. When you talk to a child, I've spent 100 days in government schools. Every year, I at least spend 5 to 10 days in a government school, living that life of a teacher, of a student at home, etc. My biggest realization is, for a child, they're not really obsessed about marks because that kind of competition and peer effects don't exist in a government school system at scale. What drives them is fun. Boring होगा तो use ही नहीं करेंगे. If you want the child, especially for home learning school, even if it's school-led home learning, if it's integrated with the school, especially in Bharat, home learning doesn't scale if it's not school-led. Even if it's school-led, it has to be fun. Homework has to be fun. Otherwise, government schools में homework का concept ही नहीं है. कई सारे states में, right? So for child, it has to be fun, and through fun, you can make the child learn. It has to be super engaging. When you talk to a parent in Bharat, their demand is, their aspiration is, I mean, that their child should have the best access to everything that the private school child is getting. right? And in private schools, you see parents obsessed with marks today. I mean, with NEP coming in now, it's moving towards competency and holistic report cards. The kind of PTM meetings that we see in private schools are very different nowadays. Some of you must have seen this. So that obsession with marks is now moving towards competency-based discussions. But in government school, that obsession for marks is also not there. First of all, the parents, and that's what we're trying to do with some of the bots that we have for parents. We send very simple report cards to parents just to get that obsession. कि पेरेंट को लगे तो सही कि मेरे बच्चे के कितने मार्क्स आए हैं या स्कूल में भेज के बस भूल गए, राइट? सो फॉर पेरेंट इट हैज़ टू बी, आई थिंक दैट ऑब्सेशन फॉर फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल नंबर्स, knowing about what my child is doing, then moving to competencies for parents. So that demand, but parents are deep interested in knowing how their children are doing. I think that is a major demand driver for us. When it comes to teachers, because these are all stakeholders, in Bharat you can't really run EdTech in isolation. You have to integrate a parent with a student, with a teacher, with the administration. And when it comes to a teacher, we see teachers loving EdTech if it saves their time. So we have an attendance bot, which is helping teachers take attendance in 10 seconds, which was earlier taking 10 minutes to do it on a register. They love that sort of tech, because it saves their time. And they don't have to do any manual data entry. Right? Similarly for assessments. पहले असेसमेंट करना पड़ता था, चेक करना पड़ता था, फिर एक्सेल बना के अपलोड करना पड़ता था, पोर्टल कई बार नहीं चलता था, बहुत टाइम लगता था. नाउ जस्ट टेक अ फोटो एंड योर असेसमेंट इज डन, राइट? सो फॉर टीचर्स इट्स वेरी इजी टू पिक अप EdTech if it saves their time, and then you can go on to create more value around. For example, teachers now have access to lesson plans, which is again I think a major driver. We are seeing good engagement on chatbots which help teachers do lesson planning very well. I am a teacher, I want to enter a classroom with better preparation, and I don't have the time to go through all that myself. And ChatGPT has been of very help. We are able to use ChatGPT in a lot of ways to, first of all, get the lesson plan, get some inspiration, then vernacularize it, and then send it to teachers. And for admins, I think it has always been about compliance. I think a lot of government officers, सरकारिया जी बैठे हैं सामने और कई सारे लोग government के मिले मुझे. I think for government, I think monitoring has been a bigger driver, because everything starts with compliance in my experience. It has to kind of serve for any policy to be executed, they need to see the data, whether it's being done right or not. And within that compliance, if you can fit in value, that really works well. I think that's how, I think it was a long answer, but I think it's very not easy to kind of just put one element as a driver. So multiple people driving multiple things here.
No, very interesting, right? I mean, EdTech, right, has all of these multiple use cases. And it means very different things for parents, for teachers, for administrators. And I think catering to the needs of all of these stakeholders in the most impactful way is the way ahead. And frankly, I think we are also at a stage where technology cannot be ignored, right? It is going to be a part of our lives. It is going to be a very prominent part of our children's life. And on that, Rahul, I will ask you to also talk a little bit about how you think, because no conversation on EdTech is complete these days without ChatGPT. So how do you think ChatGPT is going to impact education in Bharat?
You know, ChatGPT has truly taken the world by storm. For the first time, you actually get sensible answers, you know, well thought through, well structured, well researched, and you're almost surprised, like, whoa, that's a computer on the other hand. And so it's truly a step function in terms of what it can do. Now, specifically for EdTech, some of the experiments that, for example, we've been running, at a very basic level, like Shashank said, right, in terms of creation of content, it's going to be used a lot because it's easy to expand on a specific lesson plan. It's easy to create questions around comprehension. You give it a paragraph and say, give me questions about X, and it'll give you wonderful questions. Give me questions to test critical thinking, and it'll give you questions. So that, you know, in terms of content generation, I see not just ChatGPT, but also there's this sibling of ChatGPT called Stable Diffusion. If you've tried Midjourney, it generates images. So based on a prompt, it will generate images. So that's one very important segment for that. The other one, which is even more interesting, is when you get this conversing with the student in real time. So that is where you see, more higher order cognition questions coming in, critical thinking coming in. Can you question the child? Can the child question you? And can ChatGPT be that mode of answering a child? Typically, even in a household, we at some point, we say, oh, enough of your questions. Right, ChatGPT won't tire. He'll continuously answer those questions or ask you more. And that's the potential to give that intelligent companion, potentially, to children on that. Now, I'll just close that with one word of caution. ChatGPT is not factually correct. So if you ask it, oh, give me that paper that I remember about rational justification. And guess what? It would produce a paper around rational justification. It would say, oh, it's in the Stanford Journal of Philosophy, issue 131, author Martha Smith, and here's the whole article. I was like, wow, got that. I was going to refer it somewhere. And guess what? I just said, let's double check. Let's go to Stanford Journal of Philosophy, issue 131. There was no one by that author. There was no one by that name. Now what do you do? I was about to quote this to a professor when having a conversation. Now that would completely be false, right? So ChatGPT does what is called hallucinations. So this is called hallucinations. वो मनी मन कुछ बड़बड़ाता है, right? That's hallucinations for ChatGPT, and hence it's very, very dangerous to rely on ChatGPT in its current form, at least, for anything factual. And so that's a dilemma. It's a gray area because you want to let it go, leave children with it. At the same time, children are going to potentially learn something that's not true. And those are some of the challenges that everyone is working towards. The next level of this, of course, emotion. I don't think it's there yet. Consciousness, feelings, none of that exists with ChatGPT. So don't worry, it's not taking over humans anytime soon. But I think the potential of there's a potential of a lot of applications, especially for Bharat. Especially when you combine something like ChatGPT with the Bhashini, which translates that English into any language. And so that's been extremely powerful. Recently, we launched that for farmers in Uttar Pradesh, in Odisha, where we took ChatGPT, trained it with 10 years of call center data of farmers, FAQs. Hey, what would be the pesticide that will be good for this? What would be in the Kharif season, what should I plant, and so on. So FAQs plus ChatGPT plus Bhashini. Because if you don't give this in Odia, it's useless. And so getting it to local language, getting the construct and structure of an answer, the summarization of an answer with ChatGPT, and leveraging existing knowledge bases. I think that's a killer combination that will probably take us a while to get around and get used to in the next 4 or 5 years.
No, we're living in exciting times. Look forward to what is coming up. I'm going to put a few people in the room on the spot here. But the survey showed us that 85% of Indian households have access to a device. And very interestingly, there is no gender variation in device access. I mean, that to me was frankly a beautiful revelation to show where India is heading. And I know many of you also work with governments, right? So, Harish, can I call upon you to ask you the question on how do you think the government of India should be leveraging this opportunity to extend, the classroom into homes? Sorry.
So I think a few things, it can go long, so stop me if you're sick of me. But I think the first thing is that it's safe to assume that the promise and potential of technology has not been realized in many private classrooms and in most government classrooms. And that's not because technology works or doesn't work. It needs to be made to work. And governments need a lot of patience, persistence, experimentation, risk-taking, none of which really happens. So space for this needs to be created. So I think the first recommendation is that I think we actually need to have a 5-year plan It's not like 1 year PAB, right? It's, for 5 years we need to be at it, trying to have intent to figure out how to use it well. Try to use it in various modes. Don't treat failure as a signal for abandonment, but actually to try something else. Because unless we find it, and there's no point trying to copy it from the US or Germany or some other place. I think we'll have to grow it on our own petri dish. The second thing, what I would say, I'd start with intent. And the second thing is like something very basic, which is what our bank does all the time. When they want to reach us, they have our numbers, right? Now, we have 250 million students, 85% if they are on smartphone. Let's assume that maybe it's not 85, maybe it's 70. We can have that debate. But most governments will not have it in the student database. It's not captured at all. And if it is captured, it's not updated. People change their phone numbers. So how do we actually create a robust database of our students who can be reached, in times which need resilience, but on a daily basis, given that WhatsApp is so important? And how can people like Rahul here take 250 million students in multiple databases, split it into WhatsApp groups that are very specific to a school? It doesn't need to be handmade. It takes from June to October to get WhatsApp groups going in a government school. It shouldn't be taking this long. It should be actually almost semi-automated and literally updated on a daily basis. If tomorrow I get an admission, well, that child gets automatically included in the WhatsApp group. So I think there's a potential to do that. Otherwise, it's very tiring, and anything that is very tiring is not going to take off. The third thing I'd say is budgets. There is nothing in the government that fixes the mind as much as the budget does. And presently, there is no budget to leverage anything in the hands of the state government. So, one of the first things that the government can do is to say that they have a budget for leveraging this in various different ways. And they need to actually put this we put this behind products and platforms like Diksha, as a platform. The government will have its own products. But the one thing that we need to actually go and spend it on is the execution muscle of trying to use it in programs, which is how do we communicate? What is the money that is required? What is the effort required to engage parents into this exercise? It can't be just that we plug and play at some product and lo and behold, everybody adopts it. It's not going to happen. It's going to take 5 years of dedicated effort to actually engage with parents, teachers, and do the hard work of advocacy with our own students. So I think that's a third one. The fourth one, I'd say, I have made a couple of notes because Gouri had given me an indication, is the fourth one, very importantly, is state capacity. Presently, if you go to any state government or any central government, there's nobody responsible for EdTech. At the state, it is some ICT coordinator, right? ICT coordinator is the guy who can lay pipes, not the guy who can, drive water through the pipes. So I think it's very important to understand that this is a very specialized role, and currently we have hundreds of crores of money being spent without the capacity that exists in the state. So broadly, I think I'd say that, I could go on and on, as I said, but I'd stop here. But I think if the government wants to get serious about this, at least a 5-year vision, which is backed with funding, capacity, and programs.
Thank you, Harish. Just to introduce Harish, he has been working extensively with state governments in helping them, procure and adopt EdTech more effectively. So now that he's, given my secret out, yes, I did ask him to speak on this. But I'd really like to ask Sonali Khan as well from Sesame to respond to the same question. Sonali, please.
Thank you. I wish I'd prepared as well as you, so I'm not that good at examinations, but I'll give my little 2 cents. I think we are trying to play a catch-up game. The speed at which change and transformation is taking place is phenomenal, and we have seen that happen. So as the non-profit sector, government sector, etc., I think we'd like things to be structured. We like things to have this vision and plan. Of course, all of that should be in place. But I think this is the time really for action and rapid action. And we've been hearing this from the morning, the sense of emergency, the sense of movement. And I think sometimes I would like to say the media that we're working in is sort of telling us that non-linear. So we can't think non-linear. Children are not thinking non-linear as well. So that's my first thing. So government, in this case, and when we see so much happening, and sometimes it's pretty confusing, but I think that's the way it will move. So how in this kind of chaos do we make some sense of it as players? So I think that is critical. How we wrap our minds around chat, GPT, or any of these sort of tech platforms that are really going through the roof. And as content makers, as Sesame, we've been trying to make some sense of this as well. And over the last 2 years, as YouTube sort of skyrocketed and children's access really took over, and I was not surprised to see it as one of the major access, we saw so much of content uptake. So I think in this case, this is a recognition. How does the government really, at this point of time, and to what I think Harish was saying, make sense of it? So I really take from some of the subtle kind of question that was there, that we need to leave a little bit in the hands of parents and children. Right? Everything can't be super monitored, though we believe technology allows us to do that. And we want to see grades and ranks, etc. As Sesame, we would push back a little bit on that and be mindful that it's a child's learning journey at the end of the day, because we work with preschoolers, right? And that's a very different space. It's literacy, numeracy, and life skills, including socio-emotional learning, which you said ChatGPT doesn't do. So how, therefore, do we bring all of this into the learning journey? And the government has to be responsible for all. So I'm pushing the sort of the envelope on FLN++. At some point of time, we said television plus. Now we don't even talk of TV anymore for any kind of learning. It's kind of stagnated. Now it's digital. So we need to say FLN++. And I'd like to introduce that as we talk about children's EQ and IQ, both. I think I want to put that into the room as well. I love the Tulna. I used it as well, and we could, as Sesame, figure out what was missing in our own offering. So really, I think those kind of tools need to be more available and more massified. So it's not just the platform being massified, but such kinds of tools need to be massified as well. So I would put that on the government platform as well. So I would say if we are talking to government platforms like Diksha and all, we were tremendous during COVID. Like we put tons of content on Diksha. There were great partnerships with UP government around, say, social-emotional learning, different kinds of things. So I think now as we take a step back and children are back in the classroom, I think what's that balance? I think we need to be talking that at a school level, at an institutional level. So there is not just, I would say, as I think you spoke about, that what's that balance, but a responsible response. So that children, as we bring them in, I think that kind needs to come at a policy level. Because it's a lot of enthusiasm, but we need that. We don't need to monitor a child's performance to the T. I think that I would really worry. But what we should monitor is the uptake and what kind of content material is being given. Is it quality? Is it sufficient? And at what cost? I think you spoke about budget. I would not just speak budget at the government level, but at the end user. Because that is the game changer. If the cost per child per month is 20 rupees or 30 rupees, the likelihood of that child being able to access is far higher. So cost is not just at government level, but cost per child, per user. I think that's where the focus should be. I would be worried about pushing monitoring to a level where actually it becomes challenging. Indian parents love marks. I would push back on that. Being a parent myself, we love report cards. Coaching in villages is more than in urban areas. Everyone is sending their child to a coaching institute. So I would be a little cautious on that enthusiasm, and if then policy pushes for that, that's going to be even more dramatic. So a learning journey for a child is critical, and EQ, IQ, and let's push for policy in a really more pragmatic way. And I think it's going to be a tough couple of years. However, we would like to make it more structured, more linear, but unfortunately it's not going to be that.
Great. Thank you so much, Sonali. I think responsible response is what I take away from what you just said. I think we have about 5 minutes left in this discussion. So one last round of questions for all the panelists. And just taking from the first question, right? So we started the session by describing what EdTech means to school education today. But I want to conclude by really asking you to describe in a few sentences your vision of what EdTech can mean for school education in the future, especially the underserved. Sahana, you want to go first?
Okay. So, Gouri, I'm going to say something which may not be the direct answer and may not be a very popular answer, but I want to now raise a couple of concerns and cautions. We talked a lot about the excitement and the potential. So, especially with the language and the GPT, and it all exists. But what we really need to be thoughtful about is that we should take care that the technology does not, in fact, exacerbate the inequity or the differences, which is what it set out to solve in the first place. And there's tons of examples all around the world over the past 50 years or so, where technology actually has brought down the differences. It's made life a lot easier, but in some cases, it's also widened the gap. So that's one caution we have to be thoughtful about. And the other one, especially, now this is very specific to technology and EdTech, is the whole issue around ethics of the data and the privacy, because it has a lot of potential. We can do a lot of good things with the data, but it's also somebody's data. It's our children's data. It's their privacy. And to address both of these, we need all parts of the ecosystem. We need the governments to think about how to, what can be done to safeguard these. We need the private players to be involved. We need the schools and all to be involved. So that's all.
So in terms of future, let me try and paint a picture for the what of the future and how of the future. The what of the future, I think, is about higher order cognition, critical thinking in terms of what needs to be taught. And to give you a simple example, when you have had COVID, right, everyone was scrambling for a vaccine. It is a real big problem statement that nobody knows even how to tackle. Higher order cognition, critical thinking will help you solve those kind of problems. We need the next generation to be able to crack those locally. Now the how of it. We all have startups. We've all used Ola, Uber and all of that, right? We've all heard the cab driver complain about the 30% cut he's giving. I don't know how many of you visited Bangalore recently and used Nammayatri. Now, Nammayatri is an app created in partnership with JustPay by the Auto Rickshaw Union in Bangalore. Nothing to do with the government. Just taking an open standard called Beacon and applying it to mobility, allowing for rickshaw drivers to get zero commission rides. 4 lakh rides in the last 4 months, zero marketing. Now, can that be something that happens for education? Can there be cooperatives of tuition teachers creating their own little clubs? Can technology bridge collaboration amongst different stakeholders in the education space, not centered around EdTech startups, but centered around the teachers, the students who really are part of that education ecosystem? That would be the how, that would be truly magical, creating cooperatives in education.
Yeah, so I think we have been closely seeing the policy execution of NEP in India. And I think the work that is happening around digital public goods, I think Rahul has been a big contributor on that side, is very interesting. Especially in EdTech in Bharat, right, we have been trying, we are a for-profit. Despite trying very hard, right, we just did 50 crores revenue after 10 years, right, which is very tiny. So it's very evident that you can't make money building EdTech in Bharat. So I think the digital public good is very exciting, which can transform teaching learning governance at scale, for sure. In the background of NEP, NDR, and also the Vidya Samiksha Kendra initiative, which is being taken up by a lot of states, which has now become a mandate, we feel that EdTech can become the nerve center for education. And why I say so? Because everything can be integrated very seamlessly today. And I think the Bhashini plus DoubtNut example that Rahul gave is a perfect example to that. Similarly, on our platform, we have the likes of Read Along, DoubtNut, etc. And the data is moving transparently, but it's also not our data or anybody's data, it's government data. So that's digital public good, which we create and give it to the government so that they use it, sitting on their servers, which also addresses concerns around data privacy, etc., which Dr. Sahana mentioned. So I think we would want to imagine EdTech as a nerve center for education, which can integrate teaching, learning, governance, and if it's so simple in the form of AI or conversational AI, it can automatically nudge every user, be it a student, a parent, a teacher, or an admin. It has the ability to automatically nudge every user with the right content, with the right data, with the right information at the right time. So gone are the days where you have to download something, click 10 times to reach somewhere. We can, with data integration happening around NDR, I see a possibility where automatically, if you have data around assessment, the child should get content automatically. If there is data around a classroom doing at a certain level, performing at a certain level, you can nudge a teacher to do some activity in a classroom. I see this going in that direction. So very excited for the future.
Great. On that optimistic note, we are also out of time. So thank you, panelists, for a very engaging discussion. And thank you, everyone, for being a very engaged audience. Thank you.